Hey, Average Disciples, welcome to the Average Disciple podcast, where each episode is a better opportunity to understand how we live our lives on purpose with intention as disciples of Jesus. Of course, not measuring our lives by perfection, but instead in his growth, in our growth in his truth and love. The Average Disciple podcast is an endeavor by me, Brian Weaver, recorded, produced, and shared by me, but even more importantly, it grows through you, average disciples, sharing this podcast with your family members, with your friends, with your communities that God has placed you within. So please don't ever hesitate to share any episode of the Average Disciple podcast. You can like and follow the Average Disciple podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, and YouTube, all using the handle at the Average Disciple. And that's right, this season 3, we've been uploading video episodes on YouTube. So if you prefer to watch and listen, you can catch them there. Audio episodes are still going to be available on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast platforms. But without any further delay, I'm going to dive into today's episode with a friend of mine, a fellow disciple in the community of disciples of Jesus that we worship with, fellow leader with me in this community of disciples as well, Melanie Marten. And our discussion is really centered on how do you live a life of generosity and how do you teach that generosity to the next generation. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode. I know I've enjoyed my conversations with Melanie on this very topic, and I'm looking forward to what she's going to share in this episode. So without any further delay, Melanie, welcome to the Average Disciple podcast. Glad you could join me this afternoon as we recorded. And if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself to the audience of the Average Disciple podcast.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation of being on your podcast. I enjoy listening to it on the weekly and have always gathered great insight into different topics. So thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I am Melanie, and I live a crazy life with 4 kids, 3 grandkids, an amazing job working for an amazing company. I travel with my work, and I serve in various ministries in my church, which keeps me very busy. And I'm just all over. Every time I describe myself to other people or talk about what I am involved in, they're like, that sounds so exhausting. But yeah,
I think I've said that to you.
You've said that to me. It can be exhausting, but I love it. It's enjoyable to me to stay busy and enjoy fellowship with other people and stuff. That's fun.
Excellent. So as I kind of mentioned in the introduction, one of the reasons I wanted you on this podcast, and we have been trying to schedule this podcast for a very long time. And so I'm glad that we're actually getting it recorded. And because you have shared with me before about generosity and what that means to you, not only as a church leader, but even more importantly, as a disciple of Jesus and as a mom, and what that means for your family and so on and so forth. So let's just dive into that and share with me and with the listeners, what has been your experience with generosity, individually, as a family, and even within the church?
Generosity as a definition is about giving without expecting anything in return. Or, that's kind of my definition in a rough way, I guess. Mm-hmm. So it's giving of anything that you have on your heart, in your abundance of talents, in your time, and anything to other people, showing love and kindness and compassion. And as follower of Christ, that's just kind of exactly how I was raised and how I want my children to see me as a model too, and my family. And so we don't live it out as like we devote our time to this charity and we actively give X dollars to this. It doesn't come out that way, especially to our kids. It comes out how we treat people, how we give of our talents and our time to our church and to our family. And when someone calls and needs something, we're there. because at the end of the day, we also receive that generosity from others. We've had several different tragedies, in a sense, in our family, that the outpour of generosity to us during those times was amazing. And it wasn't monetary generosity. It was the text message of, here's our thought. We want you to know we're thinking of you, or here's just a verse to bless you today, or here's a $20 Starbucks gift card because you're living in a hospital and you need something. It's things you don't think about, but it's others' generosity towards you. So, or even when we've lost a parent, or we've gone through some sort of grief in our family, receiving generosity, in whether it's in food, time, money, whatever, you feel God's love just, embracing you. And they may not be Christian or, followers in the same way that you view things, but it's still generosity from them that's hugging you,
Yeah.
So it just, for our family, it's about giving of anything that we have in abundance or in scarcity. It doesn't matter if it's the last, bit of time that I have on a evening. I'm going to give that to someone because they need that 15 minutes of my time more than I need that 15 minutes to go do a laundry load. They need that more than me.
Yeah. Well, what I really appreciate that. And one of the things, I've always appreciated in our conversations around this is that understanding that generosity is not just a monetary gift. Right. And for me, that was huge in my own life and in my own experience. And as a pastor, as an individual, as a husband, so on and so forth, realizing that I can be very generous and at the end of the day, not even have to give away $1 of my own money. Like that lifestyle and that desire to help other people with what you do have. I think you hit it on the head, is the very definition of biblical generosity. And yes, of course, the Bible's talking a lot about financial generosity and using that financial gift to support the kingdom. But at the end of the day, God calls us to use all that we have. And for most of us, that's not a ton of money that we can just give away, right? But God has given us a passion. God has given us time to utilize. And so I really appreciate that aspect that you bring in your understanding of generosity, that it's whatever I have in abundance and whatever I even have in scarcity is available for somebody else's use. That's huge.
It comes too from being, having the desire to live Christ-like, right?
Yeah.
When you have that desire to live Christ-like and his generosity to us as believers and to the non-believers, his grace, all the things that he's so generous with us, what I can give, he is going to multiply tenfold.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's the 2 mites, right? It doesn't matter if it's that 10 minutes of me having a conversation with someone at church when I'm running around crazy trying to do something else. Those 10 minutes are about to be multiplied in that person's life by God and Holy Spirit, helping them take the words that I spoke with them and multiplying that.
Yeah. Well, you bring up our Savior, you bring up Jesus, right? Whom we are to follow as disciples. And, as I've read through the Gospels, I don't see anywhere where Jesus gives somebody money. He gives them time. He gives them truth. He gives them mercy and grace, all of those things. And so it's just very interesting to me that too often we get trapped in that aspect of generosity versus, as you're saying, that relationship building that actually happens in that 5-minute conversation that will last 5 months, 6 months, 10 months down the road, that you may not even realize, but how much that feeds somebody else. Yeah, that's huge. So who taught you, as you've grown up in it, who taught you, what did they teach you about generosity?
Well, I have a very vivid memory when I was a kid, and I would say maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting on a porch swing. It wasn't even on the porch. It was like out in the driveway, one of those kind of swings,
Uh-huh.
in Florida with my great grandpa, and he was in his blue cover-up overalls, work overalls. And I was this little kid, and he brought me a baby food jar and told me about tithing and what that meant, right? And when I can remember, when I filled up that jar, it was about giving it to the church and being generous with it. And so that I have that very, very early memory about being generous from the financial side. But then if you flip the story just a little bit to what generosity really means in giving of your time, your talents, your kindness, your words, that was probably embedded in me from my parents, of course, because that's who I was with most of the time.
Right.
And how we served the church, how we served our youth department, because my parents were very active when I was young in the youth, how we served the elderly in our church. So I would say they probably instilled the biggest thing of that servant's heart, that being mindful of what gifts you have. I used to sing in church a lot as a little kid. And my daddy was the music director. And so just giving of your talents, giving of your time, those things. So definitely from my parents and grandparents.
Excellent. So on that note, do you think it makes a difference in a disciple's life when they learn about generosity, or even how they learn about it? Like that memory of your great grandfather is pretty well ingrained in your memory now. And so do you think that really makes a difference in the life of a disciple and how they approach or how they live out a lifestyle of generosity?
Absolutely, because it's not even just about, it's a big picture about from a Christian perspective, but also just about your character, about building your character and generosity, and how you treat others and how you give to others is a pretty big characteristic in anyone's personality, right? So if you're able to form that with your children at an early age, for them to understand what it looks like, what the boundaries are to generosity, because there are some, what all that looks like for them at a young age, it creeps into things unconsciously as they grow up. And then you're able to kind of, what's the word, like tell the story a little different to them as they age up, like
build on it.
And but if you don't have a good foundation of what generosity means to them as a young child, you don't have much of a foundation to jump off of in the teenage world. And Lord knows teenagers don't listen to you for anything. So you have to have something of a foundation, and you're building that character in your children. So having them watch modeling your faith walk, your generosity, all those things help build that character for them to learn it at a young age. And that just builds their character as they grow.
That's excellent. So what are some tips or tricks or hacks or whatever you want to call it that you have found helpful in your own home, or that you've heard from others that really help teach that generosity to the next generation and even solidify it in you as a disciple of Jesus?
There's a couple of things that we've done in the past where, Christmas is coming and we need to purge and find space for the love that's coming from all these grandparents and all those things. And finding those things that we can give to others, or when we're doing food drives at school or at church, and having the kids go into the pantry and not choosing just the can of carrots that they hate, but also choosing something that they like a bag of chocolate chips that makes cookies, having them understand what a giving heart feels like and why we do those things. But also with the finances, when they get their presents, their birthday presents, their Christmas presents. A big piece of it, of course, is during like VBS or something like that, and they want to empty their change pockets so the boys can win, or win the contest or something like that. It comes from them knowing that the money they've been saving for that video game or that toy can go towards something at church and be multiplied. We talk a lot about that to the kids, that you giving this multiplies it in a big way, because the leaders of our church are going to use that to go do something else that's going to spread out into the community. And so that's a big thing for them to learn. And also we teach them the kindness part of it, the opening the doors for people as they're walking in, smiling, talking to people, looking at them in the eye, shaking people's hands. Those manners piece of it, but showing what God can do with you having good manners to someone else, or to modeling good behavior for other kids that may not have a home that has a lot of love, and you modeling that behavior for them and being generous with what as good manners and things like that.
Yeah. And I think, to piggyback off that, I think that's huge, especially with younger children, is the connection between generosity and kindness and respect for other people is strong, right? And so, teaching your children, and I'm not just talking about your boys, teaching your children to open doors for other people, not because you expect a thank you, but because they're a human being, like that's why you open the door for them. And using respect words, and our kids are in martial arts, and I know yours are as well. And, that's one of the key things that they talk about, is that respect for another person as an individual. That's a key piece of generosity. And, I think in conversations with other people, I think that's a key piece to understanding why we're generous, right? It's not only spreading the love of Christ and that kindness, but it's uplifting, and it's encouraging another person, right? And as you said, whatever their circumstance, whatever their life circumstance may be, it's showing them that they have value, and I think that's a key piece that sometimes we don't always talk about with generosity. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing that out as you talk about that with your kids. As a ministry leader, right? Because you are a ministry leader, so I get to have this aspect of the conversation with you. As a ministry leader, what do you desire, or what do you wish, or what do you hope that other disciples, average disciples as we call them, knew about generosity and what that does in the church, and what that does for the mission and purpose of the church?
When a group comes together and can be generous for a cause, it's great, right? It can grow in abundance. When one individual festers into another individual and teaches leadership skills, and teaches kindness and biblical foundations, all those things, that can fester and multiply that much more outside of just doing it for a cause together as a group. So I encourage leaders of our church, or just even people that aren't in any leadership roles, to not just look at getting attached to a cause, but finding people, individual people that you can speak to on a weekly basis, a daily basis. Because as an average disciple, as a Christ follower, I want to encourage people and have them see his love through me. And if I do that hidden behind a group of people, it's not necessarily going to have the same impact, right? So a lot of people have that fear of talking to someone, or that fear of not, I don't know their name, so I'm not going to go talk to them, or, but I would encourage leaders of our church and any church to take that one step and just say hello, and what's your name? My name is, and to create a relationship that is going to be small, and then it's going to keep compounding on itself to grow bigger and bigger. And that to me still models generosity, and models Christ-like, right? And in growing his kingdom. I think church leaders just as a whole, you've said it too, you can't talk to everybody, right?
Right.
And so you just can't. And you are running around crazy sometimes when you're being pulled in different directions and you're on a time crunch, or and so you want to rely on your congregation, and you want to rely on your fellow leaders and parishioners to jump in and meet those visitors and talk to those people and do those things for you. I think, again, as church leaders, we have a desire to grow his kingdom, and there's easy ways to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it, like you said, we often talk about the bad, a little bit of leaven or a little bit of yeast leavens the whole loaf, right? And so that can be for a good thing, or that can be for a bad thing. And I think, and as we've talked about in this discussion, even that modeling or following the model of our Savior and what he did, the sometimes seemingly small, and if you weren't paying attention, insignificant moments that he had with people sometimes had the biggest impact. And so in the same way, if bad yeast can ruin an entire loaf, good yeast can also help it, right? And so, like you said, just that 5-minute brief introduction conversation, just that one little encouragement to somebody around any other topic, I think can definitely spread and can grow it. And I think I think it's easier to focus on the bad that takes place and forget, if that's true about the bad, then it's also true about the good, right? If that one little negative word or negative comment can spread like a wildfire, reality is one positive, one encouragement, one hopeful statement, one teaching on generosity, one encouragement to be generous, one generous act can also do the same thing. Yeah. What encouragement would you give to other disciples that are wrestling with their generosity, be it financial generosity, lifestyle generosity, whatever it may be? What encouragement would you give to disciples wrestling with this concept?
Yeah, it's a hard concept to grasp onto, especially if your electric bill is going wacky and crazy high, and the cost
of
of
110 degrees for 3 months.
Yeah, and you're looking at your average monthly giving, and you're going, I don't even know where it's at. I would encourage faith, just leaps of faith. There have been so many examples I could give you of when I've been like, I don't know where I'm going to find the dollars. I don't know where I'm going to find the time. I have so much that I need to do today, and there's no way I'm going to find the time. I would encourage you to pray and really sit into who's in control of your finances, your day, your time, the situation, and kind of just let go. I would let go of those doubts and concerns with generosity, and sit in his grace that it's okay, and he's going to make it okay. And it'll come. I've had those times where my paycheck has been way lower than expected, and I got a letter in the mail where I needed to defer my car payment, and so my tithe check happened without an issue. There's just little things like that and it was because out of prayer. It was out of I don't know how we're going to make our bills this month. And then in the mail comes, you can defer one payment. Okay. Thank you. And we're able to, give as we always have. There's situations with time where, everybody gets the same 24 hours in a day, right? But for some reason in prayer, God can stretch those 24 hours in so many ways you don't even realize. And there's so many pressures in today's world with work, with family, with finances, that as an average disciple that is struggling with generosity, I'd say sit in prayer. And prayer doesn't have to be, in a prayer closet with a cross in front of you and a kneeling pad. It has to be with, just your thoughts with God, and having a moment of time with him and saying, this is what's weighing on my heart. He already knows, but but if you speak it and you speak to him, he'll hear you, know your heart, and make a difference if it's in his will, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say get out from behind everything you're wrestling with and take a leap of faith.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we talk about this all the time, right? It's all God's anyways, right? All of our time, all of our resourcing, all of our talent, all of it is supposed to be his. And so it makes sense. Your first step should be prayer. God, it's yours anyway. So help me steward what you've given to me.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's been, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. When that stress comes, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do at the end of the month. I know we got X, Y, and Z to hit. This summer we had a deep freeze go out, and then we had a refrigerator go out, and I'm wrestling with that. And then, but like you said, it's that reminder of, well, it wasn't mine to begin with anyways. At the end of the day, God, take it, like do what you need to do. Help me to be faithfulness. And I think just that extra step of surrender, that extra opportunity to turn back to God and go, I'm really wrestling with this, gives him even more of that much more of an opportunity to show you just how much he does provide. Yeah, that's huge. All right. So the biggest question of the entire episode.
Okay.
When you are stressed, be it because you don't know what you're going to do at the end of the month, or any number of things in your very exhausting and busy life, when you are stressed, what is your favorite dessert or activity to do to help relieve some of that stress?
Well, I can definitely tell you my stress reliever activity, it has nothing to do with exercise or yoga or anything that other people probably would say. I need to get in my kitchen and I need to bake and cook and create and read my cookbooks and get in there. That's my stress reliever. And I know a lot of people get really stressed out about that, but that's my stress reliever. Put me in my kitchen and I'm good. But then if it has to do with chocolate, I'm all in. I can take on a bag of M&Ms and not it all is right with the world, or any kind of chocolate indulgence. That's awesome. Is my stress reliever. I have this thing in my office that says, chocolate doesn't ask silly questions, chocolate understands. And that's true. Chocolate understands that it doesn't matter. So chocolate is my go-to for stress eating.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, Melanie, I really appreciate you taking just a little bit of your time and generously sharing on the Average Disciple podcast about generosity. And I'm really glad we got this scheduled, and I'm really glad that we were able to do this. So thank you for being on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
Excellent. So thanks for joining us for this episode of the Average Disciple podcast. Don't forget to like us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, by searching at The Average Disciple. Information about Melanie, our guest today, will also be in the show description, the episode description, on whatever platform you are using to interact with The Average Disciple. The Average Disciple podcast, again, is a personal endeavor of me, Brian Weaver, recorded, produced, and shared by me. But, and this is very important, but it grows through you, Average Disciples, sharing this podcast with your friends, with your family members, with your community, wherever you see fit and appropriate. So keep putting it out there for others to be encouraged and reminded of the hope that we have as average disciples in Jesus Christ. And finally, life is measured not by the perfect moments, but by the ones you grow through the most. So living your life on purpose with intention as an average disciple of Jesus is the joy that each of us has. Have a good one, guys, and we'll catch you on the next episode.